Hello and welcome to this technical glitch filled episode of the Game Guru Twitch broadcast. I am your incompetent host Lee Bamber, and this is a broadcast about how to use Game Guru, one of the easiest game makers on the planet. I must apologise for a couple of little technical glitches, i.e. my little loading splash screen not appearing anymore. My fault. I changed them from PNGs to JPEGs, so they would actually load faster on that front screen. But in doing so, my broadcast software expected the PNGs. It didn't know I'd changed it to JPEG. That's why I got a big red screen, so oops. But it's going to be corrected for the next one, so don't worry, it'll all go plain sailing next week. So, as per usual, as many people who tune into previous broadcasts know, this is live, it's unrehearsed, it's unscripted. We make it up as we go along, and we use a particular forum thread to decide what it is I'm going to talk about, which you'll discover inside the main Game Guru website's forum in product chat and then Twitch sessions, and we go to the end and see what's been added. Now, I've already had a suggestion off camera about something I would show, but I just want to see if there's any confirmation. And before I finish this sentence, I'm already seeing duplications on what you want to see. I mean, you got EBE in the first three ones that I've read. So that's probably lending itself to a sort of a thumbs up vote that I should show you a little bit of the EBE and the work that's been done so far, with a massive sort of note above it which says this isn't the final version, it's just a version. We're working to version 1, and there's going to be versions after it as people feedback on what they think of the first version. And the version you're going to see today isn't even the first version. It's sort of quite 75% towards the first version, because there's some stuff I still need to do in terms of polygon optimization, slightly better UI so it looks nice, maybe some additions to the documentation, some help, things like that. And then sort of a wider field so you can create more than one building around your level, which is something you might expect to want to do in a building editor. You don't just want one building right in the middle of your map. So there's those things to be added as well. But we'll get to that in a bit. Right now I'm just going to go through the rest of this thread, looking for suggestions that aren't about please show us the EBE. So if we just step back a little bit, because I think I went in here yesterday or the day before. New characters on the way. Most of the character creatures matches very well with my project, so I think people were really pleased to see all them characters. Since that work, I've done lots of screenshots for the non-character stuff. That's the buildings, the items, just general everyday objects across multiple time periods. It's really quite a monstrously large expansion of the game assets. So I think you'll be in for a big treat when version 1.14 comes out. David is asking for something slightly different but much needed. Can you add in place speed variable in Lua? Yeah, this is the one I remember reading, I think yesterday. It very much speaks like a feature request, and I want to separate out the difference between requests and what I should talk about in these broadcasts and actual features that we should add to the engine. There's other places for that, not in this thread, either emailing me directly or going onto the forums of Steam or the main Game Guru forum, or adding it as a suggestion to the voting board. Lots of places for new feature requests. I think a feature request, if were you to itemize them out, probably totals about 400 or 500 now. So there's always going to be things you want to see, but I'm taking that as a good sign. I'm taking that as, we really like it so far. If you only added this, it will be so much better. So these are all good positive noises. And specifically, the ability to change the speed of the player in a lower command. Great idea. Easy to add, not too difficult. Probably find its way in the next couple of updates. Not a problem. Why would you want something like that? Well, imagine you was picking up a really heavy item. You want to slow the player down whilst they're carrying this like huge heavy item. And when they drop the item down, then they can run at normal speed. Or conversely, if you pick up sort of a power up where you can double the speed of the player so you can run and escape the enemies, then that would be another way you could use this lower command. And it would obviously open up more opportunities for objects that people can create. So it attaches a script that already has this command. So lots of wonderful applications. So quite happy to add it into one of the next few updates. But not really for this particular broadcast. It will take longer than I have in the remainder of this broadcast to add that feature. Although it'd be a really good Twitch broadcast. Lee adds a new lure command live in a broadcast. So maybe that's a suggestion for the future. Learning to add progress in the EBE. Yep, that's been voted for. That's twice. Yeah, I'm all for that. That's 3 votes for it. Agreed. That's 4 votes for it. Sneak a look at EBE, 5 votes. And the last post here. Also, will there be a copy and paste added to the widget for rubber band selection tool? The ability to copy multiple entities and paste them everywhere will be awesome. Could you create a small section of map, buildings with gardens, and then copy and paste? Yeah, that was actually added at one point, but I removed it because it had the possibility of a larger ramification, i.e. not only highlighting things and then copying them and pasting big chunks of all these entities you've highlighted into other parts of the map, but what if you could highlight them all and then change common properties is them? So you could highlight them all, go into properties, and then change them all from static to dynamic. Or you could change en masse all their names. So you can, you've dropped in all these different characters, but you want all to spawn at the same time. You could highlight them all, go into properties, change the name to Enemy Wave 3, and then you've got a script that you can trigger. Anything called Enemy Wave 3 will suddenly appear. So you've created a spawn wave. But again, it's more of a feature request than something I should talk about. So for this particular case, it's discounted. But yes, another great idea. It is on the charts, but I do want to get the EBE finished. I want it out the door, and then maybe in and around the time we do the AI. We'll do that. Now, if the building editor achieves ascendance and becomes the #1 vote, the building editor is a relatively simple thing. Not the building editor, the menu editor, sorry. Is a relatively easy thing to do. And as there will be some spare time, and it is about editing, then that might be a nice time to introduce officially this idea of expanding the rubber band selection tool to include copy, paste, properties, and anything else that we feel would be a really great addition. Because there's some technical issues about doing the copy paste that is beyond what's currently available, which was done for expediency. So that's the requests. They're all unanimously talking about I should talk about EBE, so it looks like that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to switch off my Steam, because that's the one you've got, which is the 1.131, and I'm going to open up my dev folder with my dev version in it, and if I run it, as you can see, it's version 1.14-B1. It's going to go out to my internal beta testers soon, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to see what it looks like now, live and in colour. Okay, so you're all familiar with this. It's the Game Guru's main editing screen. Can anybody notice something new? Yes? No? Yes? That's right, there is a new tab. If you look under the library on the left-hand side, normally you would only see markers and entities. Now you actually have a tab called Builder. So we're going to add a marker down. Sorry. And now we're going to go into the Builder menu. Now, I apologise for the icons. It is programmer art. But in order to not embarrass myself too much, I thought I'd go for the nice black outline look. That way it's like architectural. And I might get away with this for the final release. Although I do have access to a rather fast artist at the moment who might be able to knock me out some really cool icons, so watch this space. So they're pretty self-explanatory. The first thing you want to do is click Add New Site. So that brings in this little sort of this marker. So this represents the bottom left corner of your building site. Imagine, you're doing a housing development, you have a big building site, so we're going to define that. So once you've popped it down, you see on the bottom right, you've now got a texture panel. And the texture panel is used to select lots of different textures for your building materials. Now, admittedly, I've only got 4, and then the rest are just some different colours that I chose. Brilliantly, though, the community have stepped up and are providing me with very high quality 1024 with normal and specular maps for different building materials, and they look really good. So, and then when I get back to doing the textury stuff, we'll populate that with all the different kinds of materials you might expect. Stone, concrete, wood, and metal are already in, because because those are the different material indexes you can set in the FPEs. But then there's all variations on that theme. What if you wanted sort of moss and painted wall plaster and carpets and wallpaper and different kinds of brickwork on the outside of your buildings, all that kind of thing. So that will be in there. And the idea is you'll be able to swap out these texture sets. You can have 16 per building, but then you can have different texture sets. So a building might need lots of variations all along the same kind of type of texture for your floors and your walls and your ceiling. Then you would spend those 16 textures creating those variations on the theme. So you can create some very high quality and very nice looking buildings because you'll have control over this default texture palette. This is just the one that's default. It's the one that if you don't want to create your own, then this is the one we provide you. So if we zoom in, and this is a construction area, as you can see it's tinted into this. It'll actually be a grid. In fact, it is a grid. It's not updating some shader variables. That's why it's coming down as a little bit dark. But it doesn't matter. You'll still be able to see the basic idea of the EBE. So let's say I wanted to create a building, and I have claimed in the past that it takes less than 30 seconds to make a building. So I'm actually going to prove how possible that is. So I'm going to pick wood from the texture selector. Then I'm going to pick floor. And as you can see, you've got a nice grid thing. So I'm just going to paint a floor like so. Then I'm going to pick a rock texture and click wall. I'm going to paint wall, rotate, rotate again, and then pick, say, this concrete stuff for the ceiling. And again, if I pick floor, but then use page up, it'll actually just take me up to that. And then I can drop back down again with page down. I can go to door, and then maybe pick another material, say this metal one. So I can pop in a door. And then if I wanted to windows, but have it in the same rock texture, then I can go window and window. Now, if I just didn't talk as much and just blasted it out, that would definitely be under 30 seconds. So now if we zoom, because right mouse button, just like free flight, you can actually go in, you can see your windows and your door and stuff like that. We can go in and make maybe some more changes, like let's say I wanted a window here, which rotate, we're still on window, so pop in some windows there. Rotate the cursor again, dink, 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 and then we'll have a window there and a window there, and then maybe a door in the same material, so that pops out a second door. So that's all well and good, isn't it? That's really nice. But what's the next step? Well, if you press test game, what it's going to do is something really clever. It's going to take that entire building and figure out the smallest number of collision boxes required to create that shape. So rather than it doing it per polygon, which actually would take a long time, well, what I mean by a long time is it's a lot of polygons, and when you walk near it, your physics bar would shoot up to a 99%, and the game would slow down to 10 frames per second. Doing it this way, I imagine there's only about 50 collision boxes that have been welded together. So now you can see there's no collision reduction in performance. You can rub up against all these walls with smooth collision. So it's actually using the best possible way for your collision. It's just using collision boxes, which is exactly what you want. You want to be able to create a building, and then of course get the collision for it. But that's not all. I mean, that makes a building very quickly, and as you can imagine, if I go back to the... Oh, you also notice now that now you've got into test game, it finished off doing its little shader initialization, so it looks a little bit nicer. So if we go into pick, say, another wall, you've now got your grid. Now your grid can go up page down. Notice it actually moves the camera with it as well. It's a lot easier. But you can also do wheel up and wheel down as well, so you can keep the camera placed and it just moves the grid. Now the trick to the simplicity of the EBE is you always work in 2 dimensions. You don't try and create 3D constructs, because then you have to play around with the multiple camera angles, and you put something down and then you move the camera and realise you've put it in distance. So it works very much like a canvas, and then you can raise and lower the canvas to edit different parts. So if I do page up, you'll see I've got my wall. Now let's say the second story has a different wall, so it actually has this nice concrete sort of shape. And you understand, click, 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 you can actually just drag. It does like that. So now you've got a second story. So if we actually put a hole in the floor And the way you do that is pretty simple. Select floor, and then you hover over and then hold down shift. And you can see I've actually just put a hole in the floor. Now you might want some steps leading up to there, so you've got a second story. But before we do that, just to show you that you can actually have larger rooms than these basic cubes. If I do page up again, and then do wall, like so, and paint all the way around. And you know I did a mistake there, you actually got that. It's basically just hold down shift, and it actually does a reverse of what you've seen. And then again, dink. And now you've got like a double height room. And just to finish that off, we'll click floor, we'll go up another one. And maybe this time we want a wooden floor and ceiling. So we paint it in there. And that completes our building. Now something else I should mention, you see you've got the door and window, this massive door and this tiny window. These are just things I just threw in very, very quickly and added them to these icons. Those shapes can be customised by you. If you go into a new folder called EBE Bank and go into Builder, you'll actually see that I've got a door.ebe, wall, window.ebe. If you look at the window for a second, you notice how it's laid out. You've got the one which says this is solid, you've got a 0 which says this isn't solid. So you can imagine if this was actually constructed out of cubes, you would end up with that shape. And you can go in and create your own EBE files and create any kind of shape you want. And not just a flat thing, you can have a three-dimensional, a 20 by 20 by 20 3D brush that you can paste into the EBE. And you can control these brushes yourself. You can create your own EBE files, just add them into this folder, and they'll actually appear. Obviously when I add that little bit of code into this list, so you can scroll down and see all the ones that you've done yourself. So this is a really nice big building. A bit wondering, well, where's the staircase block? Well, you can create that yourself, actually, and I'll show you how. Because you've probably noticed or guessed, look how small these grid cubes are, and look how big these walls and floor things are. What's the smallest element you can create? Well, I'm going to show you. First thing I'm going to do is drop the green grid, which is your sort of your construction area. Now if I pick cube and then place, say a piece of wood, that down, that's the smallest element, and it's a very, very small piece. I mean, if a character's running around, this is an extremely small element. But it means, of course, that you can create lots of different structures. For example, let's say you wanted this door to be more ornate, and you wanted a sort of a wooden step that precedes your building. Well, you could do that simply by going to this and then painting that. Maybe you want the step to come outside a little bit, so you could paint it there, like so. If you make a mistake like that, you just hold down shift, I'll get rid of it. So you see, you're never really having to bounce to some toolbar and constantly add and delete and stuff. It's all here. I've got my mouse in my left and my right hand. I'm hovering over the cursor movement, but also my hand is over the shift key as well, so I can instantly delete and add at my leisure. There you go. And for the door, if we go up now, remember page up moved up like an entire floor. That's because the brush you was using had that big grid dimension. If we're using a cube and you do page up, it's only going up as big as the brush size, so you're only going up by one cube. So now if we pick that metal, which was used for the door, now I apologise for the cursor should really show up here, but because of the shader is giving preference to the building instead of the cursor's being drawn first, which means it gets rendered over. But I can imagine that is where it is. And then watch, here's another little cool trick. If I line up like this, and I've got my cube, and now just hold down the left mouse button with the cube, because remember, it's a painter. It's not a placer, it's a painter. And you hold down the left mouse button and do page up. See, I can just go all the way up there, and because it's all aligned, it's very easy to do that. And again, I can move across. Now what you're not seeing is there should be a grid here, which allows me to line up this painting activity. But because both the grid and the cursor are being rendered first, they're being naughty. Which is why I'm saying this isn't the finished version 1, this is just me and my work in progress. So I hold that one down, I do page down, which goes back down to the floor. And now, seemingly by magic, I've created this nice little lip on my door and a nice little, what would you call it, a doorstep. but also I don't like the wood, so I can go back down to the floor, select it into a sort of a concrete, because I think these door things are more concrete lintels things than wood, so I think that looks a lot better. And I want it a bit thicker, so I'll just drop another one in there. And that's how easy it is to curve out your own shapes at that sort of dimension. You don't have to use the brushes, you can actually do it freehand here. And now, I bet you're wondering, well, you're not wondering anymore because you can work out the maths. We're on the floor, we've actually got a gap in the ceiling, so you probably want a step that's basically one step going up to there. And as it's long as it is high, it's basically one cube in depth. So what I mean by all that gubbins is if I start, say, here, and that's the first step, then go up one page, and that's the next step, and then that one, which is the third step, and the fourth one. Now I'm just going to do this crudely because I don't want to spend too much time. I think you get the idea of what's going on here. Essentially, we can create this sort of one up and then one back sort of trick. It gets more difficult as I can't see the grid, but it's easy just to compensate, because remember you're on free flight mode. Go up one and then move the camera. I think I'm probably already very close to the... Oh yeah, okay. So let's say I was here. Where am I now? Oh yeah, I'm there. Page up. Like that. Now, in addition to this, I think it's probably a really good idea if we have, you know, the clipping thing that we have when you press tab for regular entities. I think if we have that, then it'd be a lot easier. So when you actually do start, you know, creating staircases, but you suddenly find yourself your head sort of going through the floor, the ceiling, then you probably want to make some amends there. So this should bring us up to the level. Now obviously I think it's probably going to be a really good idea if we do insert a staircase prefab. So you can just do this with one click. But you can see our staircase has got a bit carried away, but also that we probably don't have enough gap here. So we need to create a bit of a gap there. So probably the easiest way of doing that is zoom out a little bit. Actually no, I probably can show you. I can if the highlight was put last, but it's not. Again, this is a work in progress. The easiest way is if I just zoom out, pick floor, and then make sure that's the cursors of the thing, and then go to concrete, and then page up, which goes to the first floor, which is that, I presume. Yes, zoom in a little bit so I can see it. Right, so if I right click there, what I did though, I didn't right click, I hold down shift. I keep calling it right click because that's how you used to be able to delete, but you don't do that anymore. What I basically did is held down shift and then left clicked with the floor piece there on that first floor. The grid would show that once the grid's working. But I don't like the way it sort of just cuts right up against the wall, so I'm going to add some stuff back. So I'll go to cube. Remember, we're still in the same lane, we've still got the same concrete. Then I can paint some nice edge there, which makes it look a little bit nicer. And now the staircase has enough headroom so I can climb up the staircase. The staircase gets a little bit carried away, I think. So what we do, we go up to the free flight, and we kind of work out now where the floor should be. So it runs across about there. And then you can fill all that in. Of course, what I'm thinking of doing is not just having a cube. Pull out a little bit so I can see a bit more. Not just having a cube, but like some different kind of brush sizes. So like a 2x2 and you know, 2x2b1 and then 2x2b2. So you got lots of different basic shapes just to get you started real quick. So now we've painted in our floor. It's pretty clear that all them extra staircases I did wasn't needed. So I'm on cube. So if I do page up, doesn't matter that I'm in the wrong. Actually, there is another thing I added, which I thought was really cool, is you can only delete the cube of the texture that you've selected. That way you don't accidentally delete sort of walls when you're painting. I'll give you an example. Let's say I wanted sort of a red cube here, and then I wanted another one near the wall. And I go, oh no, I didn't want it there. And I start right clicking and pressing delete. It deletes that, but it won't delete the wall part. So look, it's deleting the red that I did, but it's not letting me delete the wall. So it protects the other construction materials, and then you can always just repair it with that colour, and then like similarly I can now not delete the red. I have to go and select that particular material, and I probably have a tool somewhere where you can pick the material, so you don't have to try to find which is the exact material in the texture thing, because as I know from just doing regular art, it's very difficult to get the exact hue that you'd previously used. But we know that's wood, so we can just do that, page up, delete that, page up, like so. And there was also some ideas that we could maybe do flood fills. So let's say you wanted to flood fill delete. So anything connected to this wood would just flood fill up, and you could delete the whole thing. But flood fills can be potentially very dangerous, because if you are connected to something else that you didn't want to be deleted, then you know all hell can break loose. But whilst we're up on this level, let's have a bit of fun. Let's pick the wood, and then we'll just have a little shelf here. I'm also thinking, wouldn't it be a good idea is that when you're doing this, I actually add to the shader that renders this particular building to have some really high resolution shadows, so when you paint stuff in, it instantly casts shadows into the scene. Now maybe that's a version 2, that's sort of a build 2 feature, but it's just something that I think would help the perception of where you are in the 3D space when you're painting. And of course, down the line in a year or two, wouldn't it be great if this would actually be a great form of virtual reality editing? So then you actually see everything in 3 dimensions because you've got the headset on. So your editing experience will be even more fluid. So I think that's enough gabbing from me. I think we've created a rather horrible little building, but it just gives you the idea of, you know, like I said, you've got page down, but you can also do that. And now, if we go to test game, again, it's a work in progress. So what may be happening now, it's adding more collision boxes to the scene. So it's basically, it's already done the building, but now it's added all the boxes for the building again. So now you've got 2 collision boxes overlapping. So I wouldn't be surprised if that physics box, well, it's not too bad. Yeah, it's alright actually. Yeah, but there's, like I said, there's still more work to be done. So I see the little lip, that means you can run across there now. And we've got some steps, we can do the steps. And obviously, you are fully in control of your construction, so if you're trying to go downstairs and you hit your head on the door, well, it's the architect's fault, i.e. it's your fault. So you're probably going to have to put the staircase a little bit back, or you can just duck, get out of your building. Yeah, it's funny you can go in, but you can't go out. It must be something to do with the physics capsule that represents the player, because you don't want the player's head going through geometry, yet when you're running up, that isn't the case. But I think you are getting a little bit stuck on it. So yeah, you'd want to think more about your architecture when you're creating stuff. So there you go. It's not just about creating cube buildings. You actually have control over an individual cube to that dimension, so you can create lots of things. Now I know what you're thinking, and I actually anticipated it even on my little napkin sketch, which was, it's all very well, everything's nice, you can create any kind of shape you want now, and very large buildings should I see fit, but it's all blocks. It's like looking at a condensed version of Minecraft. So how do I create more interesting, more you know, anything that goes beyond the cube? Well, I've created a data structure so that, let me just go down to my editor again and click to cube. Just go outside here, just plonk this. I like to use visuals as much as possible. I'll drop down this green cube. That cube is represented internally as a data structure of 8 bits. That's 1 byte. Within that data structure, I'm able to store 1 of 16 texture choices, but also 1 of 15 shape choices, with 0 reserved for there's nothing in this space. So instead of a cube, because that's just 1 shape, I can have another 14 additional shapes that you could be able to paint into this little area, this smallest cube area and then do what you want with it. Now you can imagine lots of shape possibilities, but the ones I'm probably going to work on, not for version 1, I just want to give you this cube version for version 1. I want to see what you create with it. For version 2, which we'll put back on the voting board, so if people want more shapes in these tiny little cube shaped areas, then that's what you'll be voting for. But you'll be able to have slopes, so you can create sloped roofs, and you could have this shelf so it basically slopes out that way. You also have, now remember, you think a slope, like a 45-degree slope that goes from the top of that cube down to the bottom, might be one shape. It's not. Remember, we've got a byte, and that's our maximum capacity for this grid. So you're going to have 4 different slope shapes, one in each compass direction, north, south, east and west. So that takes up 4 of your shapes, which leaves 10. So for the remaining 10, we have a choice. We either do more variations on the 45-degree slope, or we offer the opportunity of a 22.5 slope, which basically will go from this corner of this rectangular box down to this corner. So it's a 22.5 slope, which would then allow you to do more interesting things like proper ramps that players could run up, and more interesting shapes like imagine the top of a wall where you've got sort of an higgledy-piggledy shape. Then you'll be able to use these sort of 22-degree shapes in order to create all those kind of wonderfulnesses. The problem is you'll end up using up probably all the remainder of the shapes, because you've got 10 available. You would need a 22.5 upper and a 22.5 lower in all 4 compass directions, so that's 8. So you'd only have 2 shapes left. And then what would that be? Now maybe, and remember, this is all up for discussion. It's community-led development, and this is just a version 1 you can start playing with. So what will version 2 be? Could it be that instead of this big chunky cube, we have like a slice? So it's like a 2-unit slice. So instead of this being the smallest wedge of geometry that you can do, you could like paint another one, which is actually like a third of that or a half of that. So you have a nice little thin piece of floor that you might want to add in. That could be one shape. Or similarly, have one at the top of the cube. So it's a thin piece, but at the top. Probably couldn't be a thin on the axis, because then you'd have no rotation slots left for the other shapes. There's the other option in which we jump it up from an 8-bit data structure to a 16-bit data structure, and then that gives us lots of shape opportunities and probably more texture opportunities as well, or maybe some other kinds of information like what material it is, so you can have one that's shiny and one that's not. But I'm hoping to carry that away from the texture selection only. So in choosing your texture construction material, you're also choosing how it reacts, so whether it's reflective, whether it's shiny, whether it's dull and stuff like that. But who knows what other properties you might want to put within this cube. Maybe the fact that it's transparent, or it's destructible, or it can move, or it moves in and out of existence, or it appears for 5 seconds and it disappears for 5 seconds. Whatever those extra bit instructions might be, that's all up for grabs. But for right now, to keep the memory footprint as small as possible, and keep the subsequent processing of this into actual geometry that you can use in your game for real, and not have all these individual cubes rendered one by one, which would be insane. Oh, and by the way, thanks to my monster rig, that's pretty much exactly what you're looking at right now. Each of these the individual cubes are conspiring inside meshes to be drawn. There's probably hundreds of draw calls for this building, and a lot of polygons that you'll never see because there's no hidden surface removal. But the process of creating the final geometry will be similar to how I've created the collision, which is to glue all these common boxes together that share the same UV data and vertex position, and then just create large chunks of block that represent the walls and the floors and the ceilings and all the different materials. So you'll end up with a very highly optimized, no polygon spurred render. So, and it'll be one call, it'll be one mesh. Remember, all these textures are in one texture atlas. So this entire building will be one draw call. It makes it highly super efficient when it comes to drawing it. which is the reason I actually set off to do it this way, rather than give you a 3D modeler inside Game Guru and make you responsible for all the hidden surface removal and optimized meshes and things like that. So that's a quick introduction, and before I leave you, you'll also notice that even though the block is that size, you'll also notice that the texture isn't wrapped to that size. Because look, this wall texture, look how interesting it is. It's not like a big grid of cubes going all the way across. It preserves a much larger texture area for each material. So you can actually have a lot of detail. Look at the floorboards. Now it wraps, as you can see, at the end of, I think it's 20 blocks. So that's 20 blocks, and then that's 20 blocks. But that texture was put in not to be seamless. I wanted to actually have this divide to show you where the floorboards were. But there's no reason why you can't have your own texture atlases with a seamless wooden texture. So that beam would just move all the way across the room. Much as it is with this rock wall, you see it's seamless. And the concrete, is that suitably seamless? Yep, you can't see the seams, it just moves all the way across. And the metal, which you've not seen much of, so just for fun, we'll select metal and then wall, and then we'll just shut up that door forever. And you see, that's seamless as well. Well, you'll only know it if I do that. So now it's seamless. And just shows how easy it is to say, oh, I've changed my mind, I'm going to seal off this door and seal off the walls. I just did it, click, click, click. And of course, this is a painting thing, so if I click floor, and then this wooden texture, look how easy it is to me to say, oh, I think I'll come out here, I'll create this corridor, I'll have another little room here. See, I've already created, so that one's a stone floor. I've already created sort of the foundations for a building, a corridor, and then another building here. And then you can wrap up some walls, create some doors and windows, maybe have some more prefabs for some staircases and some other interesting bits. And then voila, you've managed to create not only a building, but 2 buildings and a corridor between them very, very quickly. And then the next thing you're probably interested in knowing is, well, these are just holes in the wall. They're not doors, they're not windows, they're just holes. Well, that's where the idea of what's called a composite entity will come in handy. Because in addition to the construction mode, you can go back to entities, you can select, now I don't know where I've buried them all, let's just assume this barbed wire fence is actually a fully functional door. You'll be able to snap your windows and your doors into these holes. And when you snap them to the EBE building, it remembers the link association. So the entity now becomes a child of the parent, that's the building. So when you want to drag the building around, all the things that you've snapped to the building go with it. So your windows stay in the same places, your door stays in the same places. And the best thing, because they're still independent entities, you can control them just like any other entity. You can give them a script. The door can be commanded to open and close automatically, or need a key, or remote access. The windows can be there, semi-transparent, transparency mode 6, which you can then shoot at and then smash, and get rid of the windows, or smash your way in through the window. Because they are independent entities, controllable by scripts, you can do all those kind of magical and wonderful things, and yet they are still part of the overall building, which... this is an experiment. If I select that, we can actually move the whole building around. As you see, the composite entity is not working yet. That's one of the things on my to-do list. But you can imagine you'd be able to rotate and finely tune your the position of your building to wherever you want. You're no longer restricted to this 90-degree world which we had in FPS Greater Classic. Once you've edited your building, you can rotate it and place it into the exact angle that you actually need for your game. So you can actually create one building at this angle, then you can create another building at this angle, and then wedge them together. So you can have rooms with diagonal pieces in there, but you'd have to be just a little bit more creative with how you do that. And I'd be interested to see the first person who creates a circular room with the construction kit, which the EBE, which you can actually do using this rather clever technique of creating like 5 or 6 different constructions and then blending them together all in the same place. And then you'd use something like a range select in order to actually move them all in one. And maybe down the road someone requests an idea to take a lot of entities you've selected and make them a group, so you can drag them by group. Then we'll have solved that problem of circular buildings this early. But of course, with the additional slope shapes on a 16-bit data structure, then we may be able to do that another way, so it's a single building construction. So all these things for you to speculate over. This is really just a teaser to show you how you're going to be able to create buildings, any kinds of buildings you want, very quickly, very easily, just by painting and then choosing a layer and then painting again, then attaching all the really clever entities and lovely graphics that you need. Because a building's just, you know, it's just floors and bricks and beams. I mean, that's all a building is really. All the clever things, all the nice things about a building is the stuff you put on, like doors and edges and coving and furniture and carpets, you know, and lights and all those kind of things. Those are entities. Those are things you'll just snap to this construction that make your building look very, very, you know, believable, let's say. Just noticed the staircase going into a big metal wall. I say metal wall, it doesn't look particularly metal, but it will once you've got a lot of specular and some bump mapping on it, some nice local dynamic lights popped in there to give it that nice little oomph. So now is about the time, as it's 3/4 of the way into what was supposed to be a 30-minute broadcast, to go to the live chat. You don't see it in this video form, but there is actually lots of people who are watching this live and get an opportunity to ask questions. And I'm now going to look through for question marks to see if anyone's got any questions or they want me to demonstrate anything that may work that I have forgotten to talk about with the EBE. Certainly getting a lot of big thumbs up, so I'm really happy that you like it so far. No one's really saying, this is absolutely terrible, throw it away and start again. So that's good. Got one from Milo9000, question mark. Buildings created in EBE currently limited to 90-degree angles. Can the building be rotated after it's been finished? As demonstrated, yes, you can rotate them when you're finished. You can create 2 buildings and then overlap them and rotate the walls of the second onto the floor of the first. So you can basically create all kinds of curved wall shapes because the textures are inherently seamless. You would just actually manually move them about. But I'll leave that for you to experiment with once you get your hands on either the beta or the final version 1.14. Moving down, this is from Belios1, that's code for at work hiding from my boss in the break room. Okay, so Belios is sneakily watching my broadcast while at work. That's no problem from my point of view, but be careful. Maybe I should talk quiet. Got a question here. Can you save the prefabs? Well, you can create the prefabs. If you look at these prefabs that I've produced, they're just these EBEs. EBE, EBE. You can just create your own and drop them in here. Give them a thumbnail of your choice. They'll appear here. And then you'll be able to drag in your own prefabs. If you mean, can I sort of highlight all this and then do a save action and then put it into here, I'm not going to do that for version 1 because I have an idea that that's maybe something different. I'm thinking that these EBEs are like our brushes, you know, like our little toolkit of things that we reuse a lot. Whereas if you highlight an entire building, I wouldn't call that prefab, I'd call that like an entire building that you've highlighted. Now, a better question, would it be possible to save a building and then use it in more levels? Again, that's not for version 1, but I think it's a very, very cool feature to be able to do that. And if I get a lot of pressure during the beta that that's absolutely a necessity, then I will look at extending the deadline, so you're going to have to wait longer for this, but then add that feature so you can sort of save your own catalogue of entities, so then you can then load them back. And then, of course, be able to go into the a building that you've previously saved, drop back in, but then edit the building live. One of the cool things I like about this idea is that when you've created a building, you use them in levels and they're all optimized with optimized collision, optimized rendering, and you're running around and they become buildings. Wouldn't it be great if at any time you can drill back into that building and then change it at the cube level anytime you want? So all that raw data will be stored and preserved, so you can always edit a building. And if you're looking at somebody else's level, you would have to have their building just like you have to have the entities they used, but then included in that special entity would be all this cube data, so you can edit their buildings if you want to, which opens up some possibilities. Up until now, when an artist creates an entity, it's pretty much unmodifiable. It's an immutable thing that you can drag in. You maybe change some textures, but the geometry is the purview of the artist and the skill the artist had. There will be a new breed of asset where an artist will lavishly create like this wonderful palace and then provide that entity, but then you can go in and start editing the bits and pieces of that palace. So it opens up some interesting questions over the ownership of buildings and the ability to protect those graphics as well. Maybe an option to export without the edit data, so you just get the collision and the polygon optimized output, but you wouldn't actually get that raw data which allows you to edit. So lots of questions will be thrown up with this new bolt-on editor, but good questions that will hopefully be a win-win for everyone who asks and answers them. So can you save prefabs? I wasn't planning on saving whole buildings, but yeah, if you want it, then make lots and lots of noise when we start doing the beta tests, if you're part of the beta crew. Once created, can you extract another what? There is no clipboard, if that's what you mean. So you can paint, you can paint things. Again, this is a work in progress, so as I have moved and rotated it, I'm painting, but actually seeing it painting its unrotated axis-aligned space. You see, you would have to actually put it back the way this entity was. But yeah, you will be able to, this grid would move, so you'll be able to paint on wherever the rotation of the building was set. The one thing will be disabled is scale. I don't really want to start messing about with create a building and then squash it, because that's going to mess up a lot of different things when it comes to collision and editing. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe I am cleverer than I think, but I doubt it. So scale will be removed, but position rotation will be valid when you've actually created a building, and you can still go back and edit it. But as to the idea to cut and paste within this world, I was going to do it, but it's just I looked at what was required, and it would have gone on for quite a long time, and you'd never get your hands on the EBE. So again, it's one of those things, just like the save whole building. Is it something you want to see in version 1 and wait a bit longer, or do you want to get your hands on a finished version of this, what you see now, for version 1, and then we'll do another vote? See, there's a benefit to that. If we put it up for a vote for this sort of extra clipboard and stuff, and the extra ability to save buildings in your own library, it means we can get on, all of us, to things like the AI. So we can have enemies running around, darting through doors, running upstairs, firing out of windows, and you get a little bit more of that in Game Guru as well, which a lot of people want. So you see the benefit of sort of doing a little bit of everything, so a little bit of everything, everyone gets a little bit of what they want, rather than just spending the next 6 months on this one thing. And there's actually a few people already in the forum who are quite vocal about there's absolutely no need for something like this. There's no need for the EBE. We shouldn't even have it on the voting board. We should go straight to AI because it's been broken for 2 years, and that's what should be worked on. So for me to now then extend this project for another month or two to add all these extra features, just going to infuriate those voters who didn't want the EBE even more. So have to play a little bit of politics when it comes to the voting board. But this certainly delivers on what the voting board initially promised, which was the ability to create buildings quickly and easily. So technically I can tick that box, but we'll have to see what happens during the beta phase. So moving down to the next question or observation, Belios 1 looks good for a basic start, but will look very square unless I missed something earlier, needs more shapes. Yeah, it'll look extremely square. You can rotate, you can overlap buildings, so you can have circular rooms and things like that. But that will be up to the creative imagination of people using the EBE. But if you want to knock out something like a building in less than 30 seconds, I'm afraid it's going to look very square. I would quite happy to entertain deleting everything I've done so far with this EBE, and if you can come up with a design that will allow you to have non-square buildings but can let you create a building in less than 30 seconds, absolutely make that suggestion. I might be able to incorporate it into what I've already done. But I'd be very surprised if that design existed, because when you start going from a grid way of painting to handling individual polygons, you get into the realm of 3D modelling. And I think the whole point of people coming into Game Guru is they don't want to code too much, they don't want to create their own games engine, they don't want to create their own art from scratch, they don't want to create their own textures from scratch. They kind of want to sort of leapfrog all that pain and get to the point of just getting ideas in an interactive way, creating ideas, different games, and putting it out there. Which is why I want an expedient way to create things. I don't want to give people a polygon and a polygon and a polygon and have them painfully stitching them all together, and then you could have non-square rooms. But then where you end up, well, we'll have recreated a 3D modeler inside Game Guru. And what's the point in reinventing the wheel when there's some absolutely excellent 3D modelers out there, a lot of them free. So you can just go to a 3D modeler, which has had years to perfect its toolkit, and then use the file menu, import model, to actually just bring those models in. So we have to be very careful not to turn this into some sort of 3D modelling package, because then we're going to be treading on the toes of stuff that's already been invented and infuriate the people who don't want to model, who absolutely do not want to spend the next 3 months crafting one building. They want to make 50 buildings in a day, because that's what the game required. So something to think about. Dink, dink, dink. Just scrolling through the last of the feed. Synchromesh confirmed the extractor building. Well, in the sense that it's an entity, yes. I mean, if we look at this little grab point, we can move it around. As you can see, you've got position, scale will be removed. Position, rotate, you'll have properties, because this is effectively an entity. It's an entity. It just happens to have been constructed one block at a time by me. But essentially just an entity with other entities child linked to it. So we'll have properties. You'll be able to properties to sort of configure some of the things that would be common for this kind of entity. And yes, you'll also be able to extract it and then paste copies of this building down into your world. So once you've made a building and you're really happy it, you can paste it down many, many times. And you can delete it and you can lock it. It shows all those aspects of an entity. Because I really like the idea of an entity and how entities can be scriptable and you can snap them together and they work with each other, and all the engine is really entity based. So why not make this an entity? You know, why reinvent the wheel? Why create a whole new kind of object? It's just an entity with just some stuff removed and some stuff added. So hopefully that would allow you to do lots of really cool things. I'm not going to press extract now. I have not done that before. It will probably explode. So I'm not going to press that button. But yes, you can extract. Look when it's time. We've got a couple of minutes left and a few questions popping in. So we've got one from ManAlive 2000. Where can we group selected? When can we group select and clone normal entities via the widget? Not for version 1.14. I want to put all my energies into the EBE and its entity antics. Let's say 1.15 is the time when we can probably drop it in. Sneak it in. Whether it's on the voting board or not, it is a really cool feature that I think we should add in. So I want to focus on version 1.14, this thing. But let's, when I'm on version 1.15 development work and doing the betas and things like that, join me on a future Twitch broadcast, ask that same question again, and I'll pledge to add it into the version 1.15 build. How's that for a compromise? Okay, we got a big long question from, or a statement from Milo 9000. I think the EBE can be used to create substructures that can be used with more detailed entity objects to make more detailed and complex structures. Lots of potential. Exactly. Think of this like a building site. It's called before first fix, you would build up all your walls and your floors and your general structures. Then you go in with all your pipe work and your doors and your windows and your wall separators and your furniture. And then you got your, you know, until you've actually got a finished house. It's, you know, there could be a lot of time and energy put into creating your building, but I think you can get some really awesome looking buildings. This is just sort of the construction, the foundation phase of doing your building, which I think is very important. And it was also important to make sure that it was fast when it actually dropped into your game, so it didn't chug everything out. So Synchromesh gives me excellent with 2 exclamation marks, so he likes the fact that we are going to do extract and clone buildings in the first version of this EBE. Manala 2000 says, sorry to turn up late, but have you mentioned any release date estimate? No, there's no release date assigned to this. There's a few grey areas yet to be solved. We have yet to start the beta testing of it, so a lot of question marks still floating around the version 1.14. But as you can see, I'm not wasting any time in finishing off a version 1 and getting it so it incorporates well with everything else that Game Guru does. Things like terrain and stuff like that, for example. You see, it's an entity, it raises. But do you necessarily want your building raised? So you'd obviously lock. I think if we undo that, and then if we flatten the floor again. I know I'm going off on a tangent. Flatten the floor, select it as an entity, which is that. Lock it, and then raise the terrain. Yeah. See the benefit of making it an entity? It shares all the benefits of regular entities. So there you go. You can actually raise the land around it and have a sloped interior if you want with no actual floor. So no release date, sorry, but once we get a little bit further along, then I'll be able to tentatively suggest a possible release for version 1.14. But I think it's important we get this one right because it's a really cool addition to Game Guru, and for the first time lets people create large, unique custom structures with a variety of textures and enough versatility that it can create lots of different shapes. Nine Alive wants me to click the extract button to see it explode. Okay, let's just make it live. We click the building, we click extract. Well, it didn't explode, but it certainly disappeared from the face of my Earth. So that's all you got. We've extracted it out of existence. And I don't think we can get it back too, so I finish my broadcast not being able to show you the building. If I actually just click, and I press test game, will it miraculously reappear for me? No, we've completely destroyed my building. So maybe there is a good case for save building instead of just saving the building within the context of the level. So hopefully this was a nice little look into the EBE. I hope you like my choice of design and how I approached making it a very easy way of making a building. Obviously there's lots more to do, so there'll probably be another Twitch broadcast which shows all the bells and whistles and in a more finished state. But until that day, and it might be next week, depending on what else is on my plate, because there's a few other things, as you saw, the new characters and the new assets, those all have to be compiled and tested and things like that. Until then, I think it will probably be next Wednesday, but I'll let you know beforehand if it's not. I shall say adieu. Thanks very much for your kind attention. You'll get this in video form back in the main Game Guru website. So until I speak again, I shall say happy day, enjoy your future game making projects, and goodbye.